read on the page 56 of Mahayana Sutras, okay? Because I guess that's also one of the people are, especially the Chinese, are really interested how is, to understand something about the Mahayana Sutra. But we haven't really come to, about fully about understanding the Mahayana Sutra in this book. But anyway, that will be on later on the chapter 9. But at least we have some, since we're talking about Tripitaka, we were introducing about the earlier, like a Buddhist Tripitaka, I mean the three baskets. And definitely then Mahayana Sutra is as one of the very important topics, so we just have to come through a little bit on that. Before that, we stopped at page 53. It had much to do with the topic on the origin of the ancient Buddhist schools and the exegetical literatures. And I think it's a little tough subject too, also. I guess maybe just simply understand, the last time we were addressing that the Buddhists have some division after some time, after the Buddha passed away, almost 100 years. And the first time that the people having this disagreement, mostly emphasis on the conduct purpose about how the monks should have a good conduct. That's how they have somehow, like in historical record, that we have a first split among the Buddhism. And the second time when the split comes along, mostly due to with the kind of ideology of what the Arahant should be. So that's why it was some, like Mahadeva as one of the case, that a person were really saying that the Arahant is not perfect in some sense. But some other accusing the Arahant is not necessarily imperfect, but Arahant is also having actually still need the Dhamma, or kind of still need the Dhamma to encourage him to be perfect, on the whole way. So it looks like the second time of the disagreement is mostly due to because of ideology of what the Arahant is. The word Arahant. And anyone have question about Arahant? No. Anyway, Olohan in Chinese is because it's after the Buddha, then who will be the perfect person? As those who practice Buddhism is the Arahants, right? And then later, it looks like when you have the third council about the Buddhist text should be collected, should be having the Buddhist text collected together. And the monk have to stay together basically to really revise what the Buddha teaching is about. And it looks like a little political reason. I mean, this is my version of saying that was because of the King Asoka finding that there were lots of disagreement among the monks with regard to many other things. Okay, he was confused with those things. So it was a main reason why. But that's actually mainly from Pali sources. From the Pali sources said that Asoka was really wanted to really unify the Buddhism. So by asking a certain question, see whether the monk holding the same opinions as the other monks. For example, the most crucial question is that what the Buddha's belief, or what the Buddha's word is. What is the main Buddha's word? And according to the Kathavadu, the Buddha's I mean, the record of Kathavadu means one of the treatises in the Pali Buddhism, saying that if you answer that the Buddha saying many due to one saying, that means you are not belong to that so-called the good. I don't know how to call that one. Not included in what the Pali Buddhism understand as the orthodox kind of school. Rather, if you answer the Buddha using the Vibhajavada, I mean the analyzing, Buddha's teachings is based on analyzing, then you'll be accepted as orthodox schools. But this record, of course, nowadays in scholar, they would not take that very seriously about this statement, but definitely there's no doubt that Asoka trying to unify the Buddhism. I think that wasn't really a big surprising thing. It would not doubt that the Asoka did that. But it's almost like the Pali version trying to say that the other version is the correct version, the other version was not correct version. The next chapter, actually, like the subtitle under the next subtitle, many want to say that after that, actually, Buddhism has split many different schools. Okay. Please understand, to study Buddhism, I mean, generally you read the Buddhist sutra, the Buddhist text, okay? And then you also, if you're a monk, or even actually not necessarily a monk, because if you really want to understand the whole Buddhist culture, and then you have to read the Buddhist Vinaya, I mean the Buddhist principle, the Buddhist monk's code, because they relate a lot of practices, a lot of stories going on, and even including a lot of foods, what kind of food you can eat, what kind of food you don't eat, and so forth. And then if you want to go further about Buddhism, more representative of the so-called a school idea is what we call the Abhidhamma, okay? And that's what the three basket, and then you have the Sutta basket, you have the Vinaya code basket, that means the monastic code basket, and then you have the basket of the Abhidhamma. So, and we are going to have talk about Abhidhamma in the future, but anyway, it's one of the most difficult subjects to study. Not the most difficult subject to study in Buddhism, but yeah, in teachings, the most difficult subject to study is the Abhidhamma, okay? Mostly people don't read that book, do not learn that. But then Abhidhamma, mostly you could say, represent each school's ideas, because Abhidhamma is the collection of the teachings items, and then they have a systematic way to put it and analyze it, and then to explain it. I mean, definitely for the practice, for the purpose of practices. Okay. So, and then then also it's believed that even though we don't have all the sources nowadays, because we have to understand that the Muslim actually conquered India in 850 years, so all the Buddhist texts were burned, and all the Buddhist site was destroyed mostly. Okay. Anyway, so we don't have a lot of sources. Unfortunately, some of them been translated into Chinese. So that's why, and some we definitely have a proof for it, even though we might know it might be like that, but at least you have evidence that actually every school has their own Abhidhamma. Okay. Now, one of the famous schools is called Sarvastivada school, and they have their own 7 Abhidhamma texts. And then one of the like a Pali or Buddhism, and then they also have their own 7 Abhidhamma texts. They really are different, completely different texts. You could find a lot of similarity within, but I mean, in terms of system, in terms of, I mean, if I'm not really well learned, you just look at the book, the two things is completely like a different, looks like completely different thing, to you. So those what belong to what we call the school, schemism. So since then, after the Asoka, or maybe even after the Asoka period, then Buddhism had divided into many different schools. And one of the ways to distinguish them, which school to which school, I mean, let me how to put it. That, I mean, the best way to find that there are differences because they use a different Abhidhamma, maybe best to say that. But they still use very similar the monastic code. They use very similar the early Buddhist text called Agama or Nikaya. Okay, you get it now. The only difference is always in Abhidhamma. Okay. Yes.
So originally, we'll just say the interpretation is different. Now they have different Abhidhamma. Is that am I missing something?
No, you mean what is not?
So like, because to me, that Abhidhamma is some sort of original kind of 3 categories of like the sutra and the monastic and also Abhidhamma as some sort of teaching, right? And then you mentioned that different schools have their own Abhidhamma.
Yeah.
And then so by definition, that Abhidhamma means what? It's like it's just for a teaching or practice part, or it's just like the definition of the Abhidhamma itself. It means like it's just some sort of what's that? Compilation. Something I don't know how can I explain.
Maybe best to say that we definitely know there's a sutra. There's no question. Sutta in Pali, sutra in Sanskrit, right? And then we also know there were certain monastic rules that's called Vinaya, right? And then Lü Zhan, okay, that's called Vinaya. And then usually that's the reason why. Maybe best to say that in the first council, after the Buddha passed away for 3 months, I think we read that in the last session. Then after the Buddha passed away 3 months, and the monks think they should gather together as an arahants. They want to gather together to try to put down what the Buddha said, the Buddha's word, and kept that into memory, right? Now, it's for sure there's a sutta over there. How big the sutta they've been collected into memory after the Buddha passed over 3 months, we never know. But definitely we know there's a sutta being collected, and then they have agreed that they need to memorize that text, right? And the second, certainly they were part of at least the Vinaya being kept. Okay, Vinaya means the monastic code being kept. Now, according to the scholar, or even though traditionally said that, and then the other part is Abhidhamma, right? Because all Abhidhamma was composed by the disciples of the Buddha, not the Buddha by him, not the Buddha's word directly. That's why Abhidhamma always have defending himself that even though these Abhidhamma texts are, spoken by the disciples, right? But then they also defend that it also inherited by the Buddha. So you could understand it as the Buddha's word as well, right? Okay, that's about the Abhidhamma. Now, in other words, traditionally we know that we have Tripitaka, just Sanzang, right? So Sanzang, when you say we have Tripitaka, we have the 3 baskets. The Abhidhamma as one of the baskets. But I want to say actually, different school, like Sarvastivada school, Soichoyobu, or you say the Pali school, usually they believe they are the Vibhajavada, mean they're Fenbie and there are other schools, for example, Pugalavada school, Duzibu, Tuzibu, let's say Samitiya, Zhenliangbu, and all these different schools, supposedly they have their own Abhidhamma collection.
So that's the development, later on, and they say like there's some sort of pedigree. Originally, just to have 3 pieces. That's the major thing. And then later on, because of the development of the different schools, so that Abhidhamma is kind of branch out.
Not branch out. I want to say that it's okay. Maybe best to understand this way. According to the scholar first, okay. Then we will talk about tradition. Is easier. According to the scholar, most of the scholars think, those who study Buddhism and do research, they don't believe when the first council, when they have a first gathering, in order to collect what the Buddha say, they don't believe there was Abhidhamma text. Okay. Okay, that's how one of the presumption there. Okay, but then you have to understand. I want to say that we all, when you study this kind of thing, we only have to base on. You cannot just say I imagine something. You have to base on what source we have in order to make the assumption, right? And the source we have to the Pali is the Pali according the Pali commentary. We are saying that when the Buddha, when is collecting the text that time during the Buddha's time, that actually the Tripitaka was recited. That means Abhidhamma had been recited according to Pali. But only the difference is that how large the Abhidhamma extent you understood. I think we did read that certain passage also in a certain passage here said that that's for sure, let's say the Pali have 7 Abhidhamma. One of the Abhidhamma called Katavatu, okay? The word means Katavatu kind of like discussion of issues, something like that. You could just literally translate discussion of issues. So the discussion of issues is all talk about different schools have different opinions and how this Pali opinion think their opinion is not perfect, not good enough. Okay, but look at that. That definitely cannot be after the Buddha passed away 3 months. Okay, so even though it's believed to be the earliest Abhidhamma text, you know what I mean. Now I want to say that you please understand that way. It's kind of like commonly we all tradition understand there were 3 Pitaka, they mean 3 baskets, 金藏, 律藏, and 论藏, the 3 baskets, right? But the 论藏 actually, they have their own individual baskets, own individual literature.
So you would develop something just categorize as Abhidhamma, that's even in general terms.
Yes, that's the reason why even now in traditionally, even now, not traditionally, even now, like in Sri Lanka, certain people, certain monks, same as in Thailand, same as in any other, because of this understanding of that, they usually don't believe in Abhidhamma. Okay, get it now? They think Abhidhamma is later. It's not what the Buddha say. Forget about it. So okay, that is one approach. And the other approach thing, Abhidhamma actually trying to analyze the better teachings. So they think it's very serious. And well, but of course, for scholarly study, usually you first, even though whether you think Abhidhamma is important or not, but you definitely have to first, for you really, if a serious study about Buddhist text, you have to first have to analyze first. I mean, you really have to first determine whether that is a sutta saying or whether that's Abhidhamma saying. Okay. Please also understand, even in Abhidhamma, in Pali Abhidhamma, one of the texts called Vibhanga. I know because this is, I think did I print the name? I can give you the notes already. So yeah, the long list what they are talking. So the Vibhanga as one of the Abhidhamma texts actually is very clearly say, let's say what is meant by five aggregate, okay? That Sudanda say, that means the Sutta say, blah, 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 okay? And then if they were talking about, then they would say, this is how the Sutta analyzed, this is how the Abhidhamma analyzed. Actually, it's one of the Abhidhamma texts.
So can we
yeah.
put it this way, just as because you said there are several schools, right? And then you have like a big, what's that, Stavata, and then that itself also have developed its own Abhidhamma. And then among that is like, they also have something that is based on their monastic that was original from the monastic code, or the sutra that they original from the original teaching from the Buddha. Is that am I correct? Something like that.
Do you ask what happened to the original Abhidhamma?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like,
No, we will talk about original Abhidhamma later, but I just want to let you understand that we can discuss. But I can give some pictures. Where is it? Anyway. Okay, in one of the school they have 7. I think Abhidhamma also listed there. If you look at the list, there were 7 Abhidhamma texts, 7 names. Okay, so let's say what is the name? Dharmaskanda, Fa Yin Zhu Lun. So actually they have a list of what Dharma is about. So when you look at the text, it's really like if you want to find the similar text in Pali, there's none of them. Okay. But please do remember that I'm just saying that there's one literature of the Fa Yin Zhu Lun, Dharmaskanda. So they don't have the same when you look at the whole thing, chapter, the system, and the way arranging is different. So you find that you might be thinking they're different. But when you look at the content, they are very similar. I mean, they would say similar because none of the Buddhism taught. They will still have to analyze what is the 5 aggregates, what is the 12 bases, and 18. All these are the same. It's just the system is different. The system is different. Okay. So I here so far you just understand when you say the Abhidhamma text here, it then actually one of the very when you say there are different schools, sometimes there's a suspect that, but now I say there's a proof already. Actually, they have their own Abhidhamma text. Get it now? So it's kind of like a different Abhidhamma text is almost like a different Abhidhamma text is you could say is the later composed, try to represent each school's understanding of the path system, the practice system, or they have their own emphasis also, and the way, let's say how they analyze the mind, is this school is different from the other school, the way. Even the number could be different, right? Even there are many things. Other thing is how someone can be a sainthood. What is should be emphasis, and so forth. Those are. I mean, this is a huge subject. Actually, what last thing I want to say before we go to the next chapter, next subtitle. That's why I say actually to study Buddhism, the most difficult is not Mahayana Buddhism. The most difficult is this part, because in order to understand this part, you need to understand what the early sutta say, and what this Abhidhamma is about in that system, and why they are different. Okay, those are the both. Even to study Abhidhamma, it takes you 20 years, 30 years. Okay, and to study that, it's really one of the big subjects. Okay, Anyway, if you are one day if you are interested, last time I did give you to see the Abhidhamma text, and one of the joke is that, let's say you read the Chinese or you read the English, every word you understand what they say, but you don't know why. In other words, you don't understand. So that's Abhidhamma, because they do have their system to understand the list. Almost like there's a lot of formula going on, but you need to be taught how you understand the system. Now, okay, here I think like in page 55, right? They say that I think anyway those are the some of the Abhidhamma texts, okay, or the treatise. I guess we can just jump over there unless you have question. You read that. So why don't we just come to page 56, the Mahayana Sutra, okay? I think you can start from there. Do you want to read it from there? Because they come on it, yeah. Who want to read that first? Mahayana Sutra in this manner, page 56, second paragraph. Yeah, you want to read it, yeah, please. You have a question or what?
Oh, no, I can read.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why you should draw a lot.
Yeah, that's what I used to do, but later when they break, you do that.
Mahayana Sutra. In this manner, in the centuries following the Buddha's death, the various ancient schools of Indian Buddhism began to evolve, preserving their distinctive recensions of the Sutra and the Pitaka's, and developing their characteristic understandings of Abhidharma. Against this background, we find, beginning around the beginning of the Christian era, a rather different kind of Buddhist literature emerging. Hitherto unknown texts that begin with the words, "Thus I have heard," the traditional opening of the discourses of the Buddha, begin to appear. In other words, these new texts present themselves not as the commentary or understanding of a particular school of Buddhism, but as actual sutras. They thus claim the status of the word of the Buddha.
Okay, yes. Anyone want to read the next paragraph?
The texts in question are the early sutras of the Mahayana. The origin of the Mahayana are complex, see chapter 9. But this was not a sectarian literature disseminated by one of the existing schools, nor did it lead to the development of a formal division of the Sangha, with the associated Mahayana recension of the Vinaya. Indeed, the very idea of exclusively Mahayana Vinaya seem only to have emerged in the 8th, 9th century Japan with the Tendai monk Saicho. At the time of the emergence of the Mahayana literature in ancient India, members of the Sangha who were sympathetic to it followed their interest while remaining within the already existing schools and ordination lineage of the Sangha, almost invariably continue to live alongside monks and nuns who did not necessarily share their interests. The question of the status and authority of the new literature was thus initially not decided along the sectarian lines. Monks from various of the existing school would have been more or less favorably inclined toward the new sutras. In time, certain schools more formally and explicitly refused to acknowledge the authority of the Mahayana sutras, but such uncompromising attitude were perhaps not relevant until as late as the 5th century Common Era. The reason for this was that for the most part, the new sutras represented something of the minority and esoteric interest, rather than a mass popular movement. And this appears to have remained so for at least several centuries. According to the figures reported by the Chinese monks Xuanzang, by the 7th century, monks following the Mahayanas constituted about half of the Indian Sangha, but it is likely that this is the inflated figure.
All right, why don't we just read that and then we can have a little discussion. So, anyone want to read the next one? The production of the Mahayana Sutras. No one want to read it? I'm not going to read it anyway. Yeah.
The production of Mahayana Sutra spans a period of some 6 or 7 centuries, just as the earlier sutra of the Nikaya Agamas had already given rise to the Abhidhamma and the distinctive interpretation of the number of schools. So the Mahayana Sutra are also associated with the production of treatises and commentaries associated with the emergence of new philosophical schools of Buddhism. 3 writers should be singled out in this connection, since I will be referring to them from time to time. The first is Nagarjuna, a monk probably from the south of India who lived in the 2nd century CE and was the author of the Madhyamaka Karika, as well as a number of other works. He is revered by the Buddhists of China and Tibet as the founding father of one of the principal Shastra system of Mahayana philosophy, namely the Madhyamaka or Sunyavada. The other 2 authors can be taken together indeed. Tradition has it that they were brothers. They are Asanga and Vasubandhu, who lived in North India at the end of the 4th or beginning of the 5th century CE. According to tradition, questioned by modern scholarship, this Vasubandhu is one of the same Vasubandhu whom I mentioned above as author of Abhidhamma Kosa. Together, these 2 are regarded as the founding fathers of the other great Shastra school of the Mahayana, namely Yogacara and
No, and or Vijnanavada.
Which expanded the theory that apart from the consciousness of mind and the idea and information it possesses, there is nothing.
Okay. And the last paragraph, no, before last paragraph.
Mahayana Buddhism, as a more or less separate tradition of Buddhism with its clearly defined subdivisions and philosophical schools, is to some extent the outcome of the history of Chinese and Tibetan Buddhism. As evolved in China and Tibet, Buddhism came to adopt an exclusively Mahayanist outlook in a way that it never did in India. As Buddhism began to fade from the Indian scene in the 11th and 12th centuries, the Buddhists of China, Japan, and Korea to the east, and Tibet and Mongolia to the north were left as heirs to the Indian Mahayanist vision. To the south, the Buddhists of Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia became the only surviving representatives of the perspective of non-Mahayana. Yet we must remember that much of what modern Buddhists in Sri Lanka, China, or Tibet have inherited from the past was held in common by both the Mahayana and non-Mahayana tradition. And it is with this common heritage that I am mostly concerned in this book. At the same time, you should not forget that the Buddhists of Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, and Mongolia have all produced their own distinctive literatures and continue to do so right up to the present day.
All right, last one.
Having briefly reviewed the development of the Buddha's teaching in the form of literary texts, I wish to turn in the next chapter to the actual content of that teaching. In the first place, we shall focus on those basic principles which are presented in the 4 Nikaya Agama collections of the Buddhist discourses and have been assumed and taken for granted by the subsequent Buddhist tradition.
All right, thank you. Right. So any comments about what we just read or any question? I think comment would be more welcome first before the questions anyway. So the Mahayana Sutra, what you have read.
What is the name of the Abhidhamma for the Mahayana?
Oh, that's actually a good question. There was discussion about whether the Mahayana Sutra have the Abhidhamma or not. It looks like, in general, they believe that Mahayana school do not have the Abhidhamma. But then later, actually, we also found, because not just found, but definitely they might not have the Abhidhamma text as such a way like what the different schools in the past I mean, before the arising of Mahayana Buddhism, but they do have a certain similar to the Abhidhamma text, you know. Like, for example, one of the like 显然圣教论 is actually you could treat that as, I don't know how to translate that in English, that written by Asanga is almost like kind of dictionary, something like that. But yeah, compendium of Abhidhamma, yeah, that actually it's also been treated as the Abhidhamma, right? So also, yeah. No, those are not. Though you could, those are treated as a sastra. You have to understand the term. Just now you read it when the sastra. So, sastra generally means 就是 no. Usually, well, we translate as a literature, but that's a sastra. You know, sutra means jin, right? And then Abhidhamma is Abhidhamma. So that's why they don't think that is Abhidhamma. It's as a sastra. Or, 但是你讲的是白法明门论 actually 白法明门论 was not in the Sanskrit. 白法明门 was composed by Xian Zhuang. So that not include. Say that the Madhyamika Karika, 就中论颂. So Karika, it means song. So it's really like a verses, you know. No, they are all different type of thing. But Abhidhamma is always understood as one of the Tripitaka, right? One of the canons of the three canon, what we call the three basket. And then Sutra is understood as one of the canon. Yeah. No, 成唯论 actually is also written by 玄奘法师. No, 成唯论 is actually the 玄奘法师 trying to explain based on the Buddha Bhalita, basically his idea of what the Yogacara school is about, accordingly. Anyway, it's a big subject. No, 成唯论 is not. I mean, it's not in Sanskrit original. I want to say that's in Chinese. That's the reason why he say that. Don't forget later on in China they expand it, right? Like the 成唯论 is one. You say the 白法明门论 is another one, as in. So, but that is not. I mean, still not considered as Abhidhamma, right?
The street
Yes.
translation is called 论点. I checked it
For what?
For Sastra.
Yeah.
For Chinese, it's called 论点.
Yeah.
No. It's also wrong. Wrong.
It's a wrong translation.
I mean, of course, I don't know. So I'm not here to discuss because you have to understand Sastra not necessarily always run. Sastra could be commenting on no. Sastra can be many various types, but generally Sastra in Sanskrit understood is must be not just like few pages. Definitely have to be really big. Yeah, maybe best to say that. So yeah, I don't know.
Because I find in a dictionary, English dictionary definitions, a treatise of that.
A treatise, yeah. Treatise you cannot be very short. Usually it's quite big. Yeah, Sastra. Yeah, because sometimes you comment something, you could say that as. Dibhaga, many terms. In Sanskrit, many terms. When you say Dibhaga, mean you actually they have the treatise, but then you want to comment on the treatise. That means the Dibhaga, and there are so many different terms for that. So. Tika actually, okay. Tika generally mean. You definitely it's what we call a sub-commentary. You have commented something, but you need then another commenting on sub-commentary is called Tika. Okay, 书文 书 in Chinese, yeah. But 但是在古代书其实也不一定，所以这是我们自己定义，书就是一定是先有论再有书啊，但是你也知道不一定是这样啊。OK， 这个是 OK。Yes.
Following up earlier, so like, did the original Abhidhamma disappear? Like, or did they just evolve into all the later Abhidhammas? Is that why there's
no? Not disappear. I'm saying that every school have the Abhidhamma, and we were informed at least from some of the autobiography, basically like what we call, I forgot the term, hagiography, something like. Anyway, the record about the monks that. At different Abhidhamma, they will translate into Chinese. Some of them are lost. Okay, But forget about the Sanskrit, because Sanskrit completely lost already, So then the Abhidhamma also, they even usually been understood, Abhidhamma have 7. When you talk about the Abhidhamma text, that means you have there were 7 Abhidhamma texts in what we call the Abhidhamma canon, right? And but then Abhidhamma also have many, then later on people will write Abhidhamma also to explain what the Abhidhamma, for example, like Compendium of Abhidhamma and Entry to Abhidhamma, mean kind of like handbooks for people who learn Abhidhamma. So Abhidhamma later on have so many Abhidhamma books been written. And that even including, but this is why some people get confused. Actually, if you look at this, what they call this, 俱事论, Abhidhamma Kosha, okay? Actually, Abhidhamma Kosha should be understood as not the Abhidhamma, but has to understand as the Sastra. That's why it's called Abhidhamma Kosha Pasha Sastra, okay? Okay. But then Chinese think it is Abhidhamma. It's not. It is a Sastra. Sastra. The Yiche Siddhi Lun is a Sastra. Yogacara Bhumi Sastra. It's not Abhidhamma. But the system is very Abhidhammic. Okay. It's very like Abhidhamma. Okay. Right. Yes.
Are there still any modern councils that evaluate works for addition into Abhidhamma, or is it kind of hands off?
No. Abhidhamma definitely. No, but let me see how to say that. In Pali, they believe they have a first council, second council, and third council, and fourth council, right? And then they believe there was 6 council. The 5th council was during when the Sri Lanka having this problem, because when there was the South Indian people invasion to Sri Lanka, so that's why they need to gather together, and that was the only time in historic record. But we knew that actually they were in the former day also they do have that, but it's just historic record. They sit together and they want to put it in a written form. That was before Christ, okay? Before Christ, and then when they did that, that means before the era of the Christ, so they did that and put that in the written form. That's believed to be the 5th council. And the 6th council was believed only in recent century in Burma, I think it's 19 something or 80. I cannot remember the date, but they did put that. They revised all the Pali texts, asking this well-learned monk who can recite the text. And then of course they may have a little printing, and they want to do the revision. They have to do some editing, revision. So they write, if you go to Burma, they have a place that they put all the text written on the stone, like a tomb, like what they call, like a tomb, like the big kind of. And that they think that was, they believe, the 6th council, But, those are things are just limited to the Pali Buddhism, so like that, Okay, that's what the modern record.
Anything else is just like a scholarly analysis, or it's to be official.
What is by official or?
Not official. I mean, it probably is just a large enough event. It won't happen really in modern times.
No, I mean, I'm not sure.
So I think your question.
I don't understand the questions. Yeah.
Like for all currently what we have in the Tripitaka, there's no such a text like formulated recently.
Yeah. So basically there can't be any additions to the Abhidhamma.
就是说，现在目前的3藏里面，就是它就是近代已经没有就是在额外的 text 再加到3藏里面。就是比如说 latest.
No. The Tripitaka in Pali Buddhism is fixed already, but beside the Tripitaka, I guess people get confused. Okay, imagine this is a Tripitaka. Say that they will have this Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Let's say this is all, right? But of course, during the certain period of time, some great master did write, mostly, nobody will write sutras, for sure. Nobody will write Vinaya, anything, nothing. But people were still writing, commenting on the Abhidhamma. So let's say So during even in Sri Lanka, during a certain period of time, they will feel, for example, some will write SSA, write the entry to Abhidhamma, mean how to study Abhidhamma, not how. It's not like modern way, but it's like the kind of menu for people who study Abhidhamma. And like Abhidhamma Sangaha and all these things, they've been written and written and written. And then also some disagree with this system, then they will write some other Abhidhamma. For example, in Burma, one of very famous Mahasi, the past century, and he also write one of the things that, thinking that actually this, what we learn in Pali, Abhidhamma Sangha was many things was not correctly represent the early Abhidhamma. He also write many argument about that. So then you still have this kind of Abhidhamma text exist. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So Abhidhamma is almost like nobody questioned the sutta. Maybe even though have different interpretation of it, but nobody will say, okay, this is wrong. The sutta Buddha said this wrong. Nobody questioned that. But people still question with Abhidhamma way. Some disagree. I mean, when they write Abhidhamma, I mean they agree with Abhidhamma, but they would not totally have the and they would not totally agree with what other people interpret what the Abhidhamma is about. But of course, then they base on the early Abhidhamma text as well as the sutta. Okay.
So you said
Yeah.
Mahayana, basically they don't have the school of the Mahayana doesn't have Abhidhamma, that part of practice. Right?
It is how he believed in the early time, but then looks like they do have a literature very similar to Abhidhamma.
So then, but that part for the whole practice in that school is basically kind of a minor part. Then why is at that moment when they branch out, they will just say, this part is not so important. Since that, if you're gonna practice that, it's so important. How to practice it.
No, I want to say that Mahayana is, I think it's a book right in that way. Is understand actually even when the Mahayana early during the Indian time, it looks like the Mahayana and the Hinayana. You could say that the Mahayana and when it came later, right? That actually that movement were not really like they were separate themselves from the. They might be just like a group of people who are interested in Mahayana. So, but it's almost like some other. That's the reason when some other people said the Mahayana came in terms of literature studies, thinking that the Mahayana came along because they against the Abhidhamma. Okay, but then later also found very interesting. Actually, the Mahayana, all the Mahayana texts. Either they agree or disagree, but they seemingly very clear, especially the master like Nagarjuna, like the Vasubandhu Siqing, or like the Asanga Wuzhuo. And these actually, they are well-known Abhidhamma. And they are the, kind of like the pioneer of Abhidhamma, the master of Abhidhamma. So it looks like it's not like that. But it's most clear, looks like that it's, at least it's believed generally, that Mahayana do not specifically have Abhidhamma treatise, okay, have Abhidhamma text. Okay. But in other words, Mahayana is a kind of almost like saying that we only believe in the sutra. And what the sutra is, of course, then the Mahayana Sutra. So, yeah. Yes?
How does every school just create their own Abhidhamma? Like,
oh, that's a big subject. No, we don't, I mean, that's a very big subject. I mean, definitely there's no answer for this. I mean, don't worry. In the future, you will study Abhidhamma. I don't know whether you hate me or love me that time. But then you will find, you have to imagine one thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very, it's because there's no base to talk about that now so far. So, but don't forget, even all the Abhidhamma, we all analyze the Buddhism from the early sutta. Then, in other words, for example, none of the Abhidhamma say there's no Four Noble Truths. There's no, all included there. It's just they have their own system to analyze it. You could say to practice it anyway. So.
My understanding of Abhidhamma is like each school has its own way or unique way to categorize the dhammas. For example, this school might categorize this particular phenomena into this way. Another school categorize that way. Of course, why they categorize it this way and that way is definitely based on how they practice.
Anyway, it's still, I think,
That's my
whatever. Yeah, it is, but I mean, how do you explain now? It's too early to talk. Yes?
Chapter 8. Very last question, Well, you said, a way of explaining based on different categories. In terms of, you said that analogies of these things differently between the different schools. Are there any of the written works by the same authors in multiple the Abhidhammas of different schools? Like they use the writings of this particular monk, but it's also a part of the Abhidhamma of another school.
就是比如说像这个达玛桑嘎尼是谁写的？那这个达玛桑嘎尼的作者是不是在萨尔瓦斯提瓦达的这个阿毗达玛里面，他也写过同样一本书 ？Of course, the answer is no. We don't even know who's the writer.
Okay, there's no any other question, right? Any comment? You want to say something? Yeah?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm just taking a more conservative view. I'm just like, what are those like Mahayana texts? Like, how can I even call them sutras? They are not passed on by Buddha himself. So.
We will a good chapter.
Yeah, I think we can wait until later. Like, because my understanding of sutta is it has to come from the source. It's a lineage passing down from the Buddha himself. But,
to a certain degree, it is passing down by the Buddha.
But then their explanation is weird. They say, oh, well, the Arahant couldn't understand, so he taught to the divine beings. Then somehow later they went to the heaven and got it down from heaven, from the divine beings. I just don't find that convincing to me.
Anyway, I'm not here to answer this question so far. Because I think we will definitely come to the Mahayana section and we can have more discussion. We can, we don't need to have the answer right away. And so, okay, now I think what Rupert, when he write this book, he tried to say, well, actually, whatever. Now we learned there was kind of like a little bit confusion. There are Abhidhamma, there's a Sutta, there's a Vinaya, and then there's a Mahayana Sutra, and so forth, and and different schools. But then he said, but whatever, but still, but always focus on those basic principles which are presented in the four Agama first. Okay. But actually, it may be best to say, even if you really look at Mahayana or other texts also, this Four Noble Truths, is one of the very important subjects, cannot be neglected also. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, I think we just read a few parts and we have a little break. Okay. First, the Four Truths. The Four Truths is, here he put it, the disease, the cause, the cure, the medicine, because that's a simile given in the commentary. Or in the literature, I would say. Anyway, so anyone want to read the orientation of the Buddha's teaching? Okay.
I can read. What did the Buddha teach? The early sutra present the Buddha's teaching as the solution to a problem. This problem is the fundamental problem of life. In Sanskrit and Pali, the problem is termed dukkha, which can be approximately translated as suffering. In the Nikaya passage, the Buddha thus states that he has always made known just two things, namely suffering and the cessation of suffering. This statement can be regarded as expressing the basic orientation of Buddhism for all times and all places. Its classic formulation is by way of Four Noble Truths: the truth of the nature of suffering, the truth of the nature of its cause, the truth of the nature of its cessation, and the truth of the nature of the path leading to its cessation. One of the earliest summary statements of the truth is as follows.
Yeah, we can ask somebody to read that. Anyone? Okay.
This is a noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, dying is suffering. Sorrow, grief, pain, unhappiness, and unease are suffering. Being united with what is not liked is suffering. Separation from what is liked is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In short, the five aggregates of grasping are suffering. Continue.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. The thirst for repeated existence which, associated with delight and greed, delights in this and that, namely the thirst for the objects of sense desire, the thirst for existence, and the thirst for non-existence. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the complete fading away and cessation of this very thirst, its abandoning, relinquishing, releasing, letting go. This is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the noble eightfold path, namely right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration.
All right, thank you. Why don't we read that next paragraph? Okay, yeah, you want to read it? Yeah.
The temptation to understand these four truths as functioning as a kind of Buddhist creed should be resisted. They do not represent true claims that one must intellectually assent to in becoming a Buddhist. Part of the problem here is the word truth. The word satya, Pali sakka.
Satya. Satya.
Satya. Thank you. Can certainly mean truth, but it might equally be rendered as real or actual thing. That is, we're not dealing with the propositional truth with which we must either agree or disagree, but with four true things or realities, whose nature, we're told, the Buddha finally understood on the night of his awakening. The teachings of the Buddha that state the suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path to its cessation are realities which we fail to see as they are. And this is as true as the Buddhist as the non-Buddhist. The Buddhist is simply one committed to trying to follow the Buddha's prescriptions for coming to see these realities as they are. This is not to say that the Buddha's discourses do not contain theoretical statement of the nature of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path to its cessation. But these descriptions function not so much as dogmas of the Buddhist faith as a convenient conceptual framework for making sense of Buddhist thought. Thus, from one point of view, any piece of Buddhist theory can be considered as to do with the analysis of one or more or the other of the four truths.
All right, thank you. Right. Yes. Before having a break, you should make a really good comment on that. Otherwise, no break.
Comment.
Yeah.
First page, second sentence. The wording here is, I don't know, in my opinion, somewhat problematic. It says that the early sutra present the Buddha's teaching as the solution to a problem. I was under the impressions that it seems to be teaching as a solution to the problem. Whereas the problem, of course, referring to the ultimate.
To a problem and to the problem, let me say, when you say to a problem, mean to every and each problem. What does it mean? That when you say to a problem?
It's more like a metaphor. If you say just a problem, it's like a it's like a mechanism. It's like, oh, here's a problem, here's a solution. But if you say the problem, then we're focusing on dukkha itself.
I think if you haven't defined the problem, then you cannot say the problem.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just the nature.
So that's why I say to each problem. Yeah. To a problem. Yeah.
Because it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
We talk about a problem, and then you can say the problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other comment?
I don't know if it's a comment or so in the Arahat, the path of the Arahat, there's like 4, like you have to like 出果, 2果, 3果, and then Arahat.
Okay.
Did the Buddha achieve all of that over the 7 days?
No, the Buddha actually achieved enlightenment on the. It's believed that he achieved enlightenment during the very early morning at 3 o'clock. Okay.
Like 4 stages in one like morning.
No, no, actually the Buddha achieved to be a Buddha, or you could say to be Arahant. Okay. But to be Arahant in the sense mean he complete cut off the reincarnation, complete cut off all defilements. Just you could say just by 1 second. So he is an exceptional one. He doesn't have to go through the first fruit, second fruit, third fruit to become the Buddha, because then definitely that's later on that how they explain is because the Buddha actually from the long past he could have become the Arahant already, but he just didn't do that because he was having the vow to to become one day he wanted to become like the Buddha called Dipankara, because the Dipankara was the Buddha who he was actually wasn't really like a Buddhist. He was just like the ascetic or recluses who were admired by seeing the Dipankara Buddha, and he thought, okay, look, he did a so good thing, and then so many followers because of his existence. So many followers could be learned great beneficial. So and he decided that he would just wanted to become like a Dipankara Buddha. So anyway, so in other words, at that time it's believed that he actually have the quality if he just follow the Dipankara Buddha, maybe just listen to, just follow him. They didn't say much. In other words, I mean, if he want to be Arahant that time, he could be the Arahant, but he didn't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have a comment. I really like the writing here. It says, we usually say the Four Noble Truths, but it sounds like, when we say truth, it sounds like a propositional truth that we must agree or disagree. But if we use the term reality or actual things, that sounds more neutral. And you don't have to like say, I believe, I need to take a leap of faith to believe it.
Yes.
Just observe it.
And then?
That's the reality. And I think if we do talk to non-Buddhists or even Buddhists alike, if we say, well, Four Noble Truths is not what you think it is. It's not a religious commitment or faith you have to place on. It's more about describing the reality of the world. And I think that's, personally, I like that explanation.
Yeah, okay. But then, but you are not suggesting that then we need to translate the Four Noble Truth into Four Noble Reality.
No.
Right, okay, right, good.
No, the term is already there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, because one reason is because the word reality, actually, if you look at it in Pali and Sanskrit, the reality sometimes could be translated as the Dharma. Okay. So you could say that when you say that, you could say that when you use the word like Dharma Desana, I mean you see the Dharma. Actually, if you translate that in English, maybe the proper term is to see the reality. But because the word Four Noble Truth is satya, you don't translate as four reality. Not like a four dharma. You just translate it as a four truth. Yeah.
It's just like right now when we say truth, there's a kind of like a stigma into it. Just like, okay, you have to believe it.
Okay. But I think the one passage we need to bear in mind, because later we're going to read something. Bear in mind here to say, let me see, and the first paragraph. Here there's a statement saying that in a Nikaya passage, the Buddha thus states that he has always made known just two things, namely suffering and the cessation of suffering. Okay, we are going to read that. I mean, just to remember that. Because actually the text is in other texts, they were people who accused the Buddha. Blah, 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 accused the Buddha, this, that. But then the Buddha said, from the beginning, I only just tell people that what is the suffering, what is the end of suffering. So what you want to accuse for? The other presumption is not important. My presumption, Anyway, so we are going to read that later on. So we have a break, maybe give you just 5 to 10 minutes. If you can, come back 5 minutes. Otherwise,